The drilling rig shook violently as it pushed deeper into the African earth. Metal grinding against rock in a rhythm that had become familiar to the team over the past 6 months. Dear Daniel Harper wiped sweat from his forehead and checked the depth. Gauge again. 3 kilometers down and still going, the Tanzanian Rift Valley stretched out around them. A scar in the Earth's surface that had puzzled geologists for generations. Strange seismic readings had brought them here. Patterns that didn't match any known geological activity. "We're hitting something," Lisa Morrison called out from her station. Her eyes fixed on the monitor, the geologist's voice carried a note of confusion. "The drill's slowing down. But the rock density readings don't make sense." Kyle Bennett, their chief engineer, adjusted several controls and frowned. "It's not rock," he said slowly. "The resistance is wrong." Too uniform. Daniel moved to look over their shoulders. Studying the data streaming across the screens, his heart began to race as he realized what he was seeing. The drill had struck something metallic, something that shouldn't exist at this depth in a geological layer that was millions of years old. "Shut it down," he ordered, carefully. The rig powered down with a groan, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the wind whistling across the valley. The team gathered around the data readouts, each of them trying to process what they were seeing. The object below them was massive, its surface perfectly smooth, and geometric initial scans showed it extended in all directions. A structure buried deep beneath the African continent. "How big is it?" Lisa asked quietly. Kyle ran several calculations, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "At least 5 kilometers across," he replied. "Maybe larger. Our sensors can't detect the edges." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine despite the heat. Whatever they had found, it had been placed here deliberately, and judging by the geological layers surrounding it, it had been here for an impossibly long time. The news spread quickly within 48 hours. The small camp had transformed into a major research site. Scientists from around the world arrived in waves, each bringing their own equipment and expertise. The International Space Research Coalition sent their best. Dr. Amanda Pierce, a woman whose reputation for solving impossible puzzles was legendary, she stepped out of the helicopter with a tablet already in hand, her eyes scanning the drilling site with intense focus. "Show me everything," she said to Daniel. Skipping any pleasantries, they spent the next 3 days running every test they could devise. The object's composition was unlike anything in the periodic table. Materials that shouldn't exist according to current understanding of chemistry. More disturbing was what Amanda's team discovered about the signal it's broadcasting. She told the assembled scientists during an emergency meeting has been for millions of years, maybe longer. "Broadcasting what?" someone asked. Amanda pulled up a visualization on the main screen. "We don't know yet. But it's not random noise. It's structured, deliberate, and it's not aimed at Earth." The holographic display showed the signal's directionality. A beam of energy shooting out into space. "It's a beacon," Daniel said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Someone put this here to call out to the stars. The question of how to access the structure consumed them. They couldn't simply drill through it. The material resisted every cutting tool they tried. Amanda suggested a different approach, searching for an entrance rather than forcing their way in. It was Lisa who found it. A subtle variation in the structure's surface detected by ground-penetrating radar. The seam was barely visible. A hairline crack that formed a rectangle 3 meters tall when their equipment touched it. The surface rippled like water. "Everyone back," Daniel ordered. But the change was already happening. The section of metal simply vanished, flowing away to reveal a passage leading down into darkness. Lights activated automatically as they approached. A soft blue glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The interior was vast, a chamber that stretched beyond the reach of their flashlights. Technology filled the space. Machines of unknown purpose, standing silent and waiting. Amanda was the first to step inside, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution the moment her foot crossed the threshold. The entire facility hummed to life. Holographic displays materialized in the air, showing symbols and diagrams that shifted and changed. The team stood frozen, watching as the ancient systems responded to human presence for the first time in epochs. Daniel felt a mixture of wonder and fear. They had found something extraordinary, something that would change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. But as he watched the alien technology activate around them, a question nagged at the back of his mind. If this was here, buried for millions of years, who had built it? And more importantly, were they coming back? The holographic displays began to coalesce, forming patterns that almost looked like writing. Kyle pointed to one section where the symbols seemed to be repeating. It's trying to communicate, he whispered. Amanda pulled out her tablet and began recording everything, her hands shaking slightly. The excitement in the chamber was palpable, but so was the tension. They had opened something that had been sealed for longer than human civilization had existed. The facility systems continued to activate, each new display adding to the growing complexity. Somewhere deep in the structure, something much larger powered up with a deep thrumming sound that vibrated through the floor. Daniel made a decision. We need to document everything, but we also need to move carefully. Whatever this place is, it wasn't built by accident. There's a purpose here, and we need to understand it before we go any deeper. As the team began setting up their equipment, spreading out through the chamber to catalog what they were seeing, none of them noticed the subtle change in one of the displays. A countdown had appeared, numbers decreasing in a steady rhythm, and far above them, beyond Earth's atmosphere, something in deep space detected the facility's activation. Ancient systems long dormant began to wake, processing the signal they had been waiting millions of years to receive. The beacon had been answered, and those who had been watching were finally coming home. The chamber had become their entire world. For 3 days, Daniel's team worked around the clock, mapping the facility's interior and trying to understand the technology that surrounded them. Every surface seemed to serve a purpose. Every wall contained systems that hummed with quiet energy. Lisa had discovered that the blue glow came from something embedded in the metal itself, a light source that never dimmed and generated no heat. Kyle spent hours studying what appeared to be power conduits, trying to trace where the energy was coming from. His instruments showed readings that made no sense. The facility was drawing power from somewhere, but there was no generator, no fuel source he could identify. Amanda had assembled a team of linguists and computer scientists, all of them working to decode the holographic displays that filled the main chamber. The symbols shifted and changed, as if the facility was trying different approaches to communication. Then, on the 4th day, everything changed. Jake Rodriguez, a linguist from California, was studying a particular sequence of symbols when they suddenly rearranged themselves. The holographic display flickered, and new images appeared, pictograms that were almost universal in their clarity. A planet, clearly Earth, a timeline stretching back millions of years, and a species, humanoid but distinctly not human, that should have evolved here but never did. Oh my God, Jake breathed. It's showing us its history. The team gathered around as the facility systems finally found a way to communicate. The story it told was both magnificent and tragic. 65 million years ago, a civilization called the Architects had roamed the galaxy. They were ancient beyond human comprehension, beings who had mastered science and technology to levels humanity could barely imagine. They were also dying. Their homeworld had been destroyed in a cosmic catastrophe, and their species was scattered across the stars. The Architects had found Earth, a young planet teeming with life but lacking any intelligent species. They had made a choice to seed this world with their genetic material, to create a sanctuary where their descendants could evolve and eventually reclaim their heritage. They had built this facility as a repository of everything they were. A gift for the children they would never meet. But then disaster struck. An asteroid, massive and unstoppable, slammed into Earth. The architects' carefully planned evolution was wiped out in an instant. Their genetic material scattered and lost. The facility sealed itself, waiting for inheritors who would never come. So we're not supposed to be here, Lisa said quietly. The holographic display shifted again. And this time the message was clear. Humanity had evolved by chance, by accident. In the ecological vacuum left by the extinction event, they were not the intended recipients of this legacy. More concerning were the warnings that began to appear. The symbols flashed red, and Jake worked frantically to translate them. When he finally understood, his face went pale. "It says this archive is not for nascent species," he reported. "It says there's danger, that we should leave." Ryan Matthews, the security officer assigned to protect the site, stepped forward. "What kind of danger?" The facility answered by showing them new images. Defensive systems, weapons of terrible power, all integrated into the structure, and then it showed them the activation signal by entering the facility. By triggering its systems, humanity had sent a pulse of energy out into space. The same signal that had been broadcasting for millions of years had suddenly changed, announcing that the facility had been accessed. Amanda's tablet beeped. Urgently, she glanced at it, and her expression shifted from curiosity to alarm. "We're getting reports from observatories around the Fons world," she said. "They're detecting something in the outer solar system. Multiple objects, moving fast, too fast to be natural." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "How long until they get here?" "At current speed, less than a week." The chamber fell silent. The implications were staggering. Humanity's first contact with alien life. And it was happening because they had stumbled into something that wasn't meant for them over the next few days. The facility revealed more of its secrets. Jake and his team worked tirelessly to translate the messages, building a database of symbols and their meanings. What emerged was a picture of a galaxy far more complex than humans had imagined. Architects' descendants had survived, growing into a powerful civilization that called itself the Covenant of the First Design. They considered themselves the rightful inheritors of all architect technology and knowledge. They had been searching for this facility for millions of years, and now humanity had led them right to it. "They're not going to be happy to find us here," Ryan observed grimly. He had begun coordinating with military officials, preparing for possibilities no one wanted to consider. Amanda discovered something crucial in the facility's central systems. The structure had built-in safeguards, security measures designed to prevent unauthorized access. It required biological authentication, genetic markers that matched the architect's original design. "Can they access it?" Daniel asked. Amanda shook her head. "I don't think so. Not easily. The architect's descendants have evolved over millions of years. Their genetics have changed, but there's something strange," she continued, pulling up a holographic display of DNA sequences. "The facility is responding to us, to human DNA. It shouldn't be. We're not related to the architects, but there are trace markers. Tiny similarities." Lisa leaned in to study the data. "We all evolved from the same planetary ecosystem," she said. "Earth's ancient biosphere, the one that existed before the asteroid. Could there be enough genetic overlap?" "Apparently, yes," Amanda replied. "We're like very distant cousins to the species that was supposed to inherit this place. Strange cousins, but family nonetheless." The week passed in a blur of activity. Scientists worked to extract as much information from the facility as possible. Knowing that their time might be limited, world leaders were briefed on the situation, and preparations began for something humanity had never faced. First contact with an alien species that might view them as trespassers when the alien ships finally arrived. They did so with a display of power that left no doubt about their capabilities. 3. Massive vessels materialized in Earth orbit. Each one larger than any structure humans had ever built. They hung in space like dark monuments, their surfaces absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The first transmission came 12 hours after their arrival, a voice, translated by systems far more advanced than anything humanity possessed, spoke in clear English. We are the Covenant of the First Design, inheritors of the Architect's legacy. You have accessed sacred ground that does not belong to you. We demand immediate entry to the facility and the return of our heritage. You are genetic accidents, life that arose in place of those meant to inherit. You have no rights to what lies beneath your world. Daniel stood in the facility's main chamber, listening to the transmission with a sinking heart around him. His team looked equally shaken. They had made one of the greatest discoveries in human history, and now they might have to surrender it to beings who saw humanity as nothing more than an inconvenience. What do we do? Lisa asked quietly. Daniel looked around at the ancient technology, at the knowledge that could transform human civilization. If they could only keep it, we find a way to prove we deserve to be here, he said. The architects left this as a gift for worthy inheritors. Maybe worthiness isn't about genetics. Maybe it's about something else, entirely outside. In the darkness of space, the Covenant ships began to move closer to Earth, their weapon systems powering up with a light that painted the planet below in shades of threat and promise. President Christopher Allen had faced many crises during his time in office, but nothing had prepared him for this. He stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by military advisors and scientists, watching as the alien vessels moved into lower orbit around Earth. Their size was intimidating enough, but intelligence reports suggested their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's best weapons. How do we negotiate with beings who think we're accidents? He asked the room at large. Ambassador Brandon Cole, a veteran diplomat who had resolved dozens of international conflicts, stepped forward. We focus on the one thing they need from us, he said. They want access to the facility, but they can't get in without biological authentication. That gives us leverage. Christopher nodded slowly. But if we refuse, they could simply destroy us and take their chances with the facility, which is why we don't refuse. Brandon replied, we negotiate. We buy time, and we hope Dr. Harper's team finds something we can use. Commander Nicole Shaw represented Earth's hastily assembled defense fleet, a collection of military vessels and armed satellites that looked like toys compared to the alien ships. She pulled up a tactical display. We've positioned our forces in a defensive pattern around key population centers, she reported. If they attack, we'll hold them off for maybe 30 minutes before we're overwhelmed. The assessment was brutal in its honesty. Christopher made his decision. Open a channel to the Covenant. Let's talk to them. The alien commander who appeared on the screen was both familiar and utterly foreign, humanoid in basic shape, but with features that suggested millions of years of divergent evolution. Their skin had a metallic sheen, and their eyes held an intelligence that was simultaneously welcoming and cold. I am First Commander Thorol of the Covenant. The aliens said their translation seemed perfect, capturing nuances that suggested they had studied human languages thoroughly. You will grant us access to the Architect facility. Immediately, Christopher kept his voice steady. We're prepared to discuss terms for cooperation. There are no terms, Thorol replied. The facility belongs to the Covenant by right of inheritance. Your species has no claim to it. We evolved on this planet. Christopher countered. The facility responds to our biology. Perhaps that gives us some claim. Thorol's expression hardened. You are a contamination. Life that arose where it was not intended. The facility's response to you is an error. Nothing more. The conversation continued in circles. Neither side willing to give ground. Meanwhile, in the facility beneath Africa, Daniel's team had made a breakthrough. Amanda burst into the main chamber, her tablet showing complex data streams. The facility isn't just an archive, she announced breathlessly. It's a test. Daniel looked up from the control panel he'd been studying. What kind of test? The architects built in protocols for exactly this situation, Amanda explained. They anticipated that their intended species might not evolve, that someone else might find the facility. She pulled up holographic displays that Jake had helped translate. There's a challenge embedded in the core systems, a series of trials designed to determine worthiness. The architects believed that their legacy should go to whoever proved themselves deserving, not just to whoever claimed genetic inheritance. Kyle joined them, having overheard the conversation, so the Covenant doesn't automatically get access just because they're related to the architects. Exactly, Amanda confirmed. Anyone who wants to claim the archive has to prove they possess the qualities the architects valued: intelligence, wisdom, compassion, and the ability to think beyond immediate survival. Daniel felt hope kindle in his chest. Have the Covenant ever taken this test? Amanda shook her head. According to the facility's records, no one has. The Covenant has been searching for architect facilities for millions of years, but they've never found one that was still functional. This is their first real chance. It's also ours, Daniel said quietly. Ryan Matthews had been listening from the entrance. So we're in a race, he observed. Whoever completes the test first gets the archive. It's not quite that simple, Jake interjected. He had been studying the test parameters. The trials are designed for the species attempting them. They adapt to test the specific strengths and weaknesses of whoever enters. We can't just copy answers. We have to solve problems that are uniquely challenging for humans above them. The diplomatic situation was deteriorating. The Covenant had given Earth an ultimatum: grant them access to the facility within 1 week, or face military action. President Allen had tried to explain about the test, but Farrell had dismissed it as human trickery. The Covenant does not need to prove itself, Farrell had said. We are the rightful inheritors. Your species will surrender the facility, or we will take it by force. Commander Shaw had mobilized every military asset. Earth-possessed ships that had been designed for conflicts between nations were now positioned to face weapons that could reshape continents. She knew it was hopeless, but humanity wouldn't go down without a fight in the facility. Daniel gathered his team. We're going to attempt the trials, he announced. If we can complete them before the deadline, maybe we can prove that humanity deserves a place at this table. The entrance to the test chambers was in the deepest part of the facility, a massive door that had remained sealed until now. As the team approached, it opened silently, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity. The trials began immediately. The first challenge was pure physics, a puzzle that required understanding of quantum mechanics at levels humanity was still developing. Katie Sullivan, a young programmer who had joined the team just days ago, took the lead. Her fingers flew across holographic controls as she manipulated variables and tested theories. It's asking us to solve a thus paradox, she muttered. How to generate stable exotic matter. The team worked together, combining theoretical knowledge with creative thinking. Hours passed as they struggled with concepts that pushed the boundaries of human understanding. Finally, Katie made a breakthrough. Seeing a pattern that the others had missed, the solution involved thinking about the problem backwards, approaching it from an angle that seemed counterintuitive but ultimately worked. The door to the next chamber opened. Word of humanity's progress reached President Allen during a tense standoff with the Covenant fleet. had been demanding updates on when they would grant access. Growing more aggressive with each communication. "Tell them we're taking the test," Alan said to his advisors. "Tell them that if they believe they're worthy, they can take it too." When the message was delivered, Daryl's response was immediate and furious. "The Covenant does not submit to tests designed by the dead. We are the inheritors. That is all the worthiness we need." But not everyone in the Covenant fleet agreed. A junior science officer named Kelleth had been monitoring human transmissions, fascinated by their approach to the trial. Kelleth had studied the architects extensively and knew that they had valued wisdom over pride. The young officer began to question whether the Covenant's approach was truly in line with architect philosophy on Earth. Daniel's team pushed deeper into the trials. Each challenge tested a different aspect of humanity: their ability to cooperate, their willingness to sacrifice for others, their capacity for both logic and empathy. One trial required them to solve a problem that could only be completed by putting someone at risk. Lisa volunteered without hesitation, trusting her teammates to protect her while she worked on the dangerous components. The trials weren't just testing knowledge. They were testing character. The week was passing too quickly. Commander Shaw received reports that the Covenant was powering up their weapon systems. The deadline was approaching, and Farrell showed no signs of backing down in the facility. Daniel and his team faced a final trial. It was deceptively simple. A question displayed in holographic text: "What is the purpose of knowledge?" The team debated for hours. Kyle argued it was to advance civilization. Amanda suggested it was to understand the universe. Jake proposed it was to connect different forms of life through shared understanding. But it was Lisa who finally understood. "It's to make better choices," she said simply. "Knowledge without wisdom is just data." The architects didn't want their legacy to create more powerful beings. They wanted it to create better ones. The chamber filled with light as the correct answer registered. The final door opened, revealing not another challenge, but a message from the architects themselves. Daniel read it aloud, his voice filled with wonder. The architects had known they might fail, that their plan might go wrong. They had built a test not to exclude, but to ensure that whoever found their legacy would use it wisely. Worthiness wasn't about genetics or inheritance. It was about the choices a species made when faced with power beyond their understanding. As Daniel finished reading, alarms began to sound. The deadline had expired, and the Covenant fleet was moving into attack formation. Humanity had passed the test, but now they had to survive long enough to claim their prize. The facility responded to humanity's success in ways no one had anticipated as Daniel and his team stood in the final chamber. The entire structure came alive with energy that coursed through every wall, and conduit holographic displays materialized throughout the complex, showing information in dozens of languages, including several human ones. The archive was opening itself to them. "We need to get this information to the surface," Amanda said urgently. She was already downloading data streams onto every device they had. "If the Covenant attacks, at least some of this knowledge will survive above ground." Commander Shaw watched her tactical displays with growing dread. The 3 Covenant warships had formed a triangle around Earth, their weapons arrays glowing with building energy. Her own fleet, such as it was, maintained defensive positions, but everyone knew how this would end if firing started. "All ships, hold position," she ordered. "Do not engage unless they fire first. Give diplomacy every last second." President Allen was in constant communication with Farrell, trying desperately to buy time. "Our team has completed the trials," he insisted. "The facility has accepted humanity as worthy inheritors. You must respect the architects' protocols." Farrell's image on the screen showed barely contained rage. "You speak of protocols while squatting on sacred ground." The Covenant commander snarled. The architects were our ancestors, not yours. Their wishes died with them millions of years ago. What matters now is power. And we have more of it than you can imagine. The transmission cut off abruptly moments later. Energy readings from the Covenant ships spiked dramatically. They're targeting major cities. Shaw's tactical officer reported. His voice was steady despite the fear in his eyes. New York, London, Beijing, Mumbai, and a dozen others. Shaw felt her heart sink. She opened a channel to all. Earth forces. This is Commander Shaw to all units. Prepare to engage. If we're going down fighting. But before anyone could fire, something unexpected happened. One of the Covenant ships broke formation. The vessel moved away from its attack position. Its weapons powering down. Shaw's tactical display showed the ship taking up a neutral position between Earth and the Tejas and the Fae and the other two Covenant vessels. What in the world? Her second-in-command muttered. A new transmission came through. But this time, it wasn't from Theral. Face that appeared was younger, with features that suggested a different rank in the Covenant hierarchy. Science Officer Kelleth of the Covenant Research Division, the alien said. Their voice carried a tone that seemed almost apologetic. I must speak with your leaders immediately. I believe my commander is making a grave mistake. President Allen took the communication personally. I'm listening. Science Officer Kelleth glanced away, clearly nervous about openly defying their superior. I have studied the architects my entire life. Kelleth began. Their philosophy, their values, their approach to knowledge. First Commander Theral represents an older generation of the Covenant. Those who believe our genetic connection to the architects gives us automatic rights to their legacy. But I have read the architects' own writings, translated from fragments we found over millions of years. They believe that worthiness must be earned, not inherited. The young officer pulled up data on a secondary screen. Your species completed the trials, something the Covenant has never attempted because we assumed we didn't need to. According to architect philosophy, that makes you more worthy than us. Regardless of genetics, Christopher felt a glimmer of hope. Will Commander Theral accept this reasoning? Kelleth's expression was grim. No. But I am not alone in my beliefs. Many younger Covenant members question the old ways. We are transmitting your achievement to our home worlds as we speak. The political pressure may force Theral to reconsider. The standoff continued for agonizing hours. Commander Shaw kept her fleet ready, knowing that one wrong move could trigger annihilation in the facility. Daniel's team worked frantically to understand what they had unlocked. The archive was vast beyond comprehension, containing scientific knowledge that would take humanity centuries to fully process. K had discovered something particularly interesting in the facility's core systems. There's a protocol here, she called out. Something about shared access. Amanda joined her, studying the holographic code. It's a proposal system, she explained. The architects designed the archive to be accessible to multiple species, as long as they all proved themselves worthy. They didn't want their knowledge to create a single dominant power. They wanted it to foster cooperation and growth across different civilizations. Daniel understood the implications immediately, so the Covenant could have access too, if they took the trials. Exactly. Katie confirmed. This isn't a winner-takes-all situation. The architects wanted their legacy to benefit everyone worthy, not just one species. This information was transmitted to President Allen immediately. He saw the opportunity it presented and opened a new channel to both Theral and Kelleth. Commander Theral. Science Officer Kelleth, I have a proposal. Christopher began. The archive contains a protocol for shared access. Multiple species can benefit from architect knowledge, as long as they prove themselves through the trials. Humanity has completed the test, but the Covenant can take it as well. There's no need for conflict. Theral's response was swift and dismissive. The Covenant does not take tests like common students, Keleth interrupted. Broadcasting on an open channel that other Covenant ships could receive, with respect. Commander, is pride worth more than the Architect's actual wishes? We claim to honor them. But we ignore the very protocols they established. How does that make us worthy inheritors? The question hung in space like a physical thing on Covenant worlds light years away. The debate was already beginning news of humanity's achievement and Keleth's challenge to traditional Covenant thinking had spread through their communication networks. Younger Covenant members, raised on stories of architect wisdom and philosophy, began questioning whether their leader's approach aligned with those values back in Earth orbit. The situation remained tense. The two aggressive Covenant ships maintained their targeting locks, but neither Ferethriel was receiving communications from their government. Pressured by a growing movement among their own people to resolve this peacefully, Daniel emerged from the facility to find the world watching and waiting. News networks around the globe were broadcasting the standoff, showing the alien ships hanging in Earth's sky like swords of judgment. He gave an interview from the excavation site, speaking directly to humanity and, through translation systems, to the Covenant as well. We didn't seek this out, he said. We were scientists doing research, trying to understand our world better. What we found was a gift from beings who understood that knowledge should lift everyone up, not just those who claim genetic rights to it. The architects built a test because they knew that true worthiness comes from choices, not bloodlines. Humanity has proven we can make good choices. We hope the Covenant will choose to join us in learning from this legacy, rather than trying to take it by force. The broadcast reached Keleth's ship, and the young officer made a decision. They opened a direct challenge to Therrell using ancient Covenant protocols. I invoke the right of philosophical challenge, Keleth announced formally. I contend that our current course of action dishonors the architects we claim to revere. I request permission to take my crew and attempt the trials, to prove that the Covenant can earn what humanity has already won. Therrell couldn't refuse without violating deeply held Covenant traditions. The challenge was legitimate, and denying it would undermine Therrell's own authority. Permission granted, Therrell said through gritted teeth, but this changes nothing. The facility belongs to the Covenant. Keleth's ship moved toward Earth. Approaching the facility's location, Amanda coordinated with them, providing information about the trials and what to expect. The young Covenant officer and their crew entered the facility with a mixture of reverence and determination. They faced the same challenges humanity had overcome, puzzles and tests that pushed them to their limits. The trials adapted to Covenant strengths and weaknesses, just as they had for humans. What surprised everyone was how similar the two species' approaches were. Both humans and Covenant used teamwork to solve complex problems. Both showed willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. Both demonstrated the capacity for wisdom alongside intelligence. As Keleth's team progressed through the trials, something shifted in the broader Covenant fleet. Other ships began to question Therrell's hardline stance. If their own people could work alongside humans in the trials, treating them as equals, perhaps the old commander's view of humanity as genetic accidents was outdated. The deadline Therrell had set passed. Then another. The Covenant commander found themselves boxed in by their own traditions and the changing attitudes of their people. When Keleth's team finally completed the trials, emerging successful just as humanity had, the political landscape had transformed. The archive opened for them as it had for Daniel's team. Recognizing another worthy species, Commander Shaw watched her tactical displays as the threatening posture of the Covenant ships gradually relaxed. Weapon systems powered down, not all at once, but in a cascade. As ship after ship stood down, the crisis wasn't over, but the immediate threat of annihilation had passed. President Allen addressed both species in a broadcast that would be remembered throughout history. 3 months after first contact, the facility beneath Africa had become something unprecedented. A true meeting ground between species. The transformation was remarkable. What had begun as a tense standoff had evolved into something that gave both humans and the Covenant hope for the future. Daniel walked through corridors that now hummed with activity from two different civilizations. Human scientists worked alongside Covenant researchers, their different perspectives, creating insights that neither species could have achieved alone. Language barrier had disappeared within the first month, as Covenant translation technology proved far more sophisticated than anything humanity had developed now. Conversations flowed naturally, with only occasional pauses for concepts that didn't translate perfectly between cultures. Lisa had become close friends with a Covenant geologist named Veth, and the two spent long hours comparing notes on planetary formation. Earth and a Covenant home world had evolved under vastly different conditions, which made their similarities all the more fascinating. Your species developed consciousness during an ice age, Veth observed one day, studying Earth's geological records. That explains so much about human psychology. You had to cooperate or die, which made you naturally inclined toward teamwork. Lisa nodded. What about the Covenant? Our evolution occurred during a period of abundance, Veth replied. Resources were plentiful, which led to more individualistic development. It's only in the last million years that we learn the value of true cooperation. The conversations happening throughout the facility were reshaping both species' understanding of intelligence and civilization. Kyle had been working with Covenant engineers on understanding the facility's power systems together. They had made breakthroughs that would have taken humanity centuries to achieve alone. The energy source is actually drawing from quantum fluctuations, he explained to a visiting delegation of Earth scientists. Architects learned to harvest the background energy of space itself. The implications were staggering. Limitless clean energy, the possibility of faster-than-light travel, technology that could transform human civilization overnight. But the archive didn't just give answers. It taught principles and methods, ensuring that both species truly understood what they were learning. Amanda had taken on the role of coordinating the research efforts. She worked closely with Kelleth, who had been promoted within the Covenant hierarchy for their role in preventing war. The young officer's decision to challenge Theral had made them a symbol of a new generation of Covenant thinking. We're finding that the architects organized their knowledge very deliberately, Amanda explained during one of their daily briefings. It's not just a database. It's a curriculum. They're teaching us to think like they did, to see connections between different fields of study, Kelleth agreed. My people have been searching for architect facilities for so long that we forgot to ask why they built them this way. They weren't trying to create a shortcut to advanced technology. They were trying to create wise civilizations. The political situation had stabilized, though not without difficulty. Commander Theral had been recalled to the Covenant homeworlds, replaced by a more moderate leader who understood the changing times. Many older Covenant members still struggled with the idea that humans, whom they had initially dismissed as primitive accidents, were their equals in accessing architect knowledge, but the evidence was undeniable. Both species had passed the same trials, proven themselves by the same standards. President Allen had worked tirelessly to build a framework for cooperation. The facility was declared neutral ground, governed by a joint council with equal representation from Earth and the Covenant. Other nations on Earth had initially protested, wanting their own access, but Allen had convinced them that humanity needed to present a united front. We can share this knowledge among ourselves, he had argued, but if we start fighting over it, we prove we weren't worthy after all. Commander Shaw had maintained Earth's defensive fleet, but its purpose had shifted. Instead of preparing for war with the Covenant, They were now coordinating with Covenant vessels to protect the facility from other potential threats. The galaxy was a big place, and not everyone would be as willing to negotiate as Kelleth had been. Katie Sullivan had made one of the most significant discoveries since the archive opened working with a Covenant programmer. She had found hidden layers in the facility's systems that revealed even more about architect philosophy. They expected this. She told the Joint Council during an emergency session. The architects knew that multiple species might find their facilities. They designed the whole system to encourage cooperation. She pulled up data showing that the archive became exponentially more accessible as more species proved themselves worthy. Knowledge that had been locked away became available when human and Covenant researchers worked together, solving problems neither could have completed alone. It's brilliant, Kelleth breathed. They're still teaching us, even millions of years after their extinction, teaching us that different perspectives make us stronger. The first class of students entered the facility 6 months after first contact. 20 humans and 20 Covenant young people, selected from thousands of applicants, would study together under the guidance of the archive's teaching systems. Daniel stood at the entrance with Kelleth, watching the next generation file past him. Looked nervous, others excited, but all of them carried the weight of being pioneers. My daughter is among them, Kelleth said quietly, gesturing to a young Covenant student near the back. I want her to grow up in a galaxy where cooperation is normal, not exceptional. Daniel smiled. My niece is here too, the one with the red backpack. I understand exactly what you mean. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Representatives from both species spoke about the importance of the work being done here, about the legacy they were all inheriting together. When Lisa took the podium, she shared something personal. 3 months ago, I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid of the aliens in our sky, afraid of war, afraid that humanity wasn't ready for this. But I've learned that fear comes from seeing others as different, as threats. The Covenant aren't threats. They're colleagues, friends, partners in discovery. We evolved on different worlds, but we're all reaching for the same goal: to understand the universe and our place in it. Veth stood beside her, adding their own perspective. The Covenant has much to learn from humanity. The alien geologist said, your species achieved consciousness recently, which means you remember what it's like to struggle, to have nothing but your own ingenuity. We had forgotten that humility, but you've reminded us. The students began their orientation, guided by holographic projections of architect teachers. The ancient beings had recorded lessons that adapted to their students, providing exactly the level of challenge needed for growth in the archive's deepest chambers. Researchers from both species were uncovering secrets that would shape the next 1,000 years. Maps of the galaxy showing the locations of other architect facilities, most of them still undiscovered scientific theories that pushed the boundaries of physics into realms neither species had imagined. Cultural records that showed the architects had been a civilization of incredible diversity, with hundreds of different subspecies working together in harmony. They weren't just one people. Amanda realized they were a coalition, like what we're building here. The implications were profound. The architects hadn't succeeded despite their diversity, but because of it, different perspectives, different ways of thinking, all united by common values and goals. Ryan Matthews, who had transitioned from security officer to diplomatic liaison, coordinated cultural exchange programs. Covenant citizens visited Earth, experiencing human art, music, and cuisine. Humans traveled to Covenant worlds, seeing civilizations that had developed over millions of years. The exchanges weren't always smooth. Cultural misunderstandings happened regularly, but both species learned to laugh at their mistakes and try again, building bridges one conversation at a time. 1 year after first contact, the Joint Council made a historic announcement. the facility would become the home of the Galactic Academy, an institution dedicated to discovering other-worthy species and bringing them into the growing coalition. The architects left facilities all over the galaxy. President Allen explained, each one contains the same tests, the same invitation to prove worthiness. We propose that humanity and the Covenant work together to find these sites and welcome others who pass the trials. The Covenant leadership agreed, seeing the wisdom in expanding their alliance. A galaxy united by shared values would be stronger than one divided by competition for resources. Daniel stood in the main chamber, looking at holographic projections showing potential facility locations. Calf joined him, and together they studied the maps. There could be hundreds of species out there waiting to be found, the Covenant officer said, each one with their own unique perspectives and abilities. Daniel nodded. The architects created something bigger than we imagined. Not just an archive of knowledge, but a framework for galactic civilization. The first expedition launched 3 months later. A joint human-Covenant vessel designed to explore the galaxy and search for other architect facilities. Commander Shaw led the military contingent, while Amanda headed the scientific team. The ship itself was a marvel, combining human and